Today I shall speak about a very tiny area which was part of the talk, on the basis of which he drew something like a quantum circuit, which he said is the modern version of von Neumann's measurement theory in 1932. The idea here is, maybe before I proceed, let me say that this work is done together with Abhinav Deshpande and Nitika Sakharwade at IIT Kanpur. Now, let me start by saying that a typical quantum state, if you know the quantum state completely, you still don't know, for instance, the position. Because in general, the state is not an eigenstate of position. Now, however, what we are taught is that if we make a setup to measure the position, we shall find a definite value. And how does this concretely come about? The most foundational work on this subject was done by John von Neumann. Here is John von Neumann. And what he did was to say that I have the system coupled to some pointer coordinate. Let us say the pointer wave function is peaked at a certain point. After the measurement interaction with the system, the pointer coordinate would be peaked around some other point, and the amount of the shift will tell you the position of the system that you started to measure with. Now that's in principle very simple. But what is probably not so well known is that whereas a single observable, which could be position, momentum, or anything else, can be measured in this way with the von Neumann procedure, it was quite a different thing if you wanted to measure, for instance, position and momentum. First of all, in quantum mechanics, we are afraid of non-commuting observables. We are told to be very careful. We cannot measure position and momentum together. We are told that if you measure some observable, the state collapses to an eigenstate of that observable. Of course, in quantum mechanics, because of the commutation rule between position and momentum, there is no simultaneous eigenstate of position and momentum. So, finished, we cannot measure position and momentum together. However, John von Neumann in this book also discussed that we can nevertheless measure position and momentum approximately. We may not be able to measure it exactly as we can for a single observable. When you take two non-commuting observables, it is still possible to get an approximate idea of their values. But the precise way how that comes about was done much later by Arthurs and Kelly and by Arthurs and Goodman. And all this research made us learn a new uncertainty principle. The usual uncertainty principle says that we cannot prepare a state of the system which has uncertainties delta Q and delta P in such a state that the product is smaller than half h bar. The new uncertainty principle that Arthurs and Kelly and Arthurs and Goodman discovered was called the measurement uncertainty principle, which says the following, that if you try to measure position and momentum together, the product of the uncertainties has to be bigger than h bar, that is at least twice the preparation uncertainty. And how did this come about? I will give a brief introduction about the work of Arthurs and Goodman, who used an extension of the von Neumann interaction to develop a theory of joint measurement of position and momentum. And then I will go on to show the work that is done together with Abhinav and Nitika, which in fact does not attempt a simultaneous measurement of position and momentum, but attempts something quite different, which we call quantum tracking. And the word quantum tracking was in fact used first by Arthurs and Goodman, I believe. With that introduction, I begin some discussion of the work of Arthurs and Goodman, basically. Yes, I think I said all this before. Well, maybe it doesn't hurt to repeat the second paragraph of this. The idea is the initial values of the system observables are to be inferred from the final values of the pointer observables of the apparatus after a measurement interaction. So the description, now bear with me for a little while to make a few mathematical statements, after which we will discuss the physical content of these things. So I have this system described by a Hilbert space H1, and it is allowed to interact with an apparatus in a Hilbert space H2 for a certain time interval capital T. And the system apparatus states are in H1 cross H2. Now H1 cross H2 consists of all those wave functions which are of the form, all the states which are of the form Cmn times phi m times chi n. They constitute the Hilbert space H1 cross H2, where phi m belongs to H1 and chi n belongs to H2. So the state of the joint system will be a state in H1 cross H2, and they will have a unitary time evolution. If you start with a pure state, it will evolve with some unitary matrix U of t. Let me briefly say the state at time t is U of t times the state at time 0. Now we shall assume that the system apparatus initial state is factorizable. This is, if you will recall, an assumption which was stated already by Laos Diosy. The system apparatus initial state is assumed to be factorizable, phi 0 times chi 0. And of course, if you don't have an initial pure state, you have a density operator rho 0, it evolves in this way, U of t, rho 0, U of t dagger, where, again, let me repeat, the initial state now is a factorized initial state, rho 1 cross rho 2, corresponding to the factorized wave function which I mentioned before. Now, in the Heisenberg representation, observables have this time evolution, xt equals ut dagger x ut, and this means that the trace of rho 0 xt is the same as trace of rho t x. That is, you can use the initial state if you use the Heisenberg operators, and the result is the same as using the final state and the initial operator. So now I am ready to define tracking. I repeat the definition of Arthurs and Goodman. The apparatus observable at time capital T tracks the system observable A at time t equals 0 if the expectation value in the final state of the observable x of the apparatus is the same as the expectation value of the of the system observable A at the initial time, which is equivalent to saying that the trace rho 0 xt minus A equals 0. And for brevity, we will denote these traces in the initial state by a bar, over bar. So this xt bar is trace rho 0 xt. So in this notation, this equation becomes xt minus a average equals 0. For now, the most important thing about the definition of tracking is that this has to happen for every initial state. Because the state you are making measurements on, or the state you are probing, is unknown. So when you say that the apparatus observable tracks the system observable, it makes sense only if it holds for every initial state of the system. Now, of course, when that is tracking, however, it does not follow that the tracking is noiseless. It does not follow, for instance, that the average of x square t minus a square, which is this average being defined in the way I mentioned before, does not follow that this average will be 0. And so it does not follow that the RMS deviations of xt and a will agree. But if they do, we will say that we have noiseless tracking. That is, if not only the averages, but also the standard deviations of xt and a agree, we say that the tracking is noiseless. Now, this already is the thing which Arthurs and Goodman discussed in detail, but I will here make another definition, which I call faithful tracking. The apparatus observable x at time capital T tracks the system observable at t equals 0 faithfully if x and a, first of all, have to have the same spectrum, that is the same set of eigenvalues, if you like, and if for all functions fa and fx, which are defined by means of their eigenfunction expansions, fx at t tracks f of a for all initial states. That is not only the square, but in fact all functions, if they are reproduced, then you say you have a faithful tracking. The faithful tracking is equivalently stated by this equation, but let us skip that for the moment. Now, when I make this definition of faithful tracking, people may say, oh, that is very, very hard to have a situation in which all functions of the apparatus of the pointer observable will reproduce the corresponding function of the apparatus observable. It is very, very hard in general. And in fact, that is the beauty of the very simple von Neumann interaction Hamiltonian. When you look at it, it is so simple to solve, etc., that you forget that there are certain beauties contained in that very simple expression of von Neumann. So von Neumann's interaction here between an apparatus state and an apparatus observable x is given by this expression. Let us say I take the simple case of the observable A being the position of the system, let me call it Q, and P1 being the momentum operator for the pointer, which I call P1, and K is a constant, the strength of the interaction. So, as we saw in the morning, this Schrodinger equation can be solved exactly. And the solution is just phi of q, the same unchanged system wave function, but the pointer wave function shifted by an amount kqt. If we now assume that the pointer wave function is peaked at x1 equals 0 and has a certain width parameter b here, and if we choose the product kt equals 1 for specificity, we find that the apparatus density, we find the apparatus density operator by taking a trace over the system coordinates. And the diagonal elements of the apparatus density matrix are then easily calculated to be this expression, which you don't have to read in detail, except to notice one very important fact, which is that if b goes to 0, that is the width of the pointer wave packet goes to 0, then this quantity is just a representation. This quantity divided by b is a representation of a delta function centered centered at q equals x1. Therefore, in that limit, this expression, that is the reduced density operator of the system, the diagonal element of that, x1, x1, will go to phi q equals x1 modulus square. That is to say, the position probabilities for the system will be reproduced exactly by the reduced density matrix of the apparatus. And because of this, you can easily see that arbitrary functions of x1 at t will track the corresponding function of the position of the system. So there is faithful tracking in the von Neumann model. It is not only noiseless tracking, it is faithful tracking in the limit of b going to 0. But as I indicated before, this is the most simple situation, and if you ask for a simultaneous measurement of two non-commuting observables, the situation changes completely. And we then get into what is called the measurement uncertainty relation. So this is the model of Arthurs and Kelly, and later Arthurs and Goodman, which constitute an extension of von Neumann to joint measurements. And the basic idea is that the measurement interaction should couple the non-commuting system observables A1 and B1. For instance, A1 and B1 could be position and momentum. And this cross product means that these are purely system observables. These identity operators are for the apparatus space. And that the interaction will couple these two things to two commuting observables of the apparatus. Now you see the observables of the apparatus I denote by I1 cross R2 and I1 cross S2. I1 being the identity in the system space, and R2, S2 are apparatus operators. And why do we assume that these are commuting observables? Because we say that quantum mechanics allows us to measure simultaneously commuting observables. So we are applying the rules of quantum mechanics. We assume that the pointer observables, which measure the position and momentum respectively of the system, are actually commuting observables. So here I have already said this, that if I have an initial state ρ1 cross ρ2, then the expectation value of the noise operator xt minus a equal to 0 defines the tracking of x by a. And if this happens for all states ρ1. Now this in fact also implies that the noise is uncorrelated to every self-adjoint system operator, which is of the form C1 cross I2. That is, not only trace ρ1 cross ρ2 nx is 0, but if I put here a C, which is of the form C1 cross I2, that is, it's a purely system operator, then you see whether it's nxc or cnx. For instance, let me take the case C1 cross I2. C1 cross I2, I am not able to jump across nx, but the traces are known to be cyclic. Therefore, I can take C, this trace is equal to the trace which I obtain if C appears before ρ1. And then, of course, this becomes a different system 1 operator. So I will not go into the details. It follows by the hypothesis that the tracking holds for every system, every initial state of the system. It has to happen that both these are also 0. And there follows the simple theorem that if xt, yt track the system operators a, b respectively, and nx, ny are the corresponding noise operators, then the RMS deviations defined by sigma x square equals x square bar minus x bar square, and similar relations for yt must obey sigma x square equals sigma a square plus sigma nx square, sigma y square equals sigma b square plus sigma ny square. The proof is, the proof being so simple, you don't really have to remember it. You can derive it in 1 minute. You just take sigma x square equals nx plus a square bar minus nx plus a bar square. Then you use the fact that the terms nxa, a nx have 0 expectation value, and you are back to this answer. I'm sorry, I wrote A0 is the same as A. I have used a redundant notation here. So I have, now let us remember this relation. Sigma x square is sigma a square plus sigma nx square. Sigma y square is sigma b square plus sigma ny square, where x and y are the apparatus operators which track the system operators A and B. A and B are non-commuting, and x and y are commuting. This immediately implies that the noise commutator nx, ny has an expectation value which is the difference of the expectation values of the commutator xy and the commutator AB. And this is in fact the source, direct source of the measurement uncertainty relation. You will see that the proofs are all very, very simple. You can just sit down and do it in half an hour. Here comes the crucial hypothesis of simultaneous measurability. If we now assume that xt, yt are just the Heisenberg operators rt, st, corresponding to simultaneously measurable, that is commuting operators, apparatus observables rs, then because rt, st are unitary transforms of rns, their commutator is also 0. And therefore it follows that the commutator of nr, ns, average of that is the minus the average of this. Because in the previous slide you see, you have this relation, and if this commutator is 0, then I have nx, ny bar equals minus ab bar. That's very simple. But now I know that if I know the commutator of two observables, there is the usual uncertainty relation given by the Schwartz inequality. That is, the Schwartz inequality says that for any two operators nr, ns, sigma nr, sigma ns must be greater than or equal to half of the expectation value of a commutator of nr, ns, and then the modulus of that. This is the usual thing which gives us delta q, delta p bigger than half qp commutator, which is h bar, ih bar. So this is the usual one which gives half h bar as the uncertainty product lower limit for q and p. But now it follows that this quantity, because of this relation, has to be equal to half of ab commutator bar modulus. So that is for the product. If you try to evaluate this, I have sigma nr square, sigma ns square, which is now given by 1/4 ab square lower limit. And then I have sigma a square, sigma b square, which also has a similar limit. But then there are these cross terms, sigma nr square, sigma b square, and sigma a square, sigma ns square. And then you can use the fact that x square plus y square is bigger than twice xy to find that this product is in fact bigger than 4 times what you get from each of these terms. So that's the last final relation. You get that sigma r square, sigma s square is bigger than or equal to expectation value of commutator AB modulus square. So this is the relation which tells you that if you are going to measure Q and P together, then the uncertainty product for measurement will be not 1/4 of h bar square, but in fact h bar square, which is bigger than the preparation uncertainty relation. So this is, so far, it is just the work of Arthurs and Goodman. Now, what I will show in the work we have done recently, which is being written up now, is the fact that using the same Hamiltonian of von Neumann, Arthurs and Kelly, it is possible to do noiseless tracking of non-commuting observables. And here I will distinguish between tracking and measurement. In measurement, you assume, you justify the relation that the commutator of R and S is 0 by saying that R and S represent macroscopic measuring apparatus. But no definition, no accurate definition or what is macroscopic is available. Therefore, it is simpler for us to simply say that the Arthur-Goodman theorem just says that noiseless tracking of non-commuting system observables is impossible by using only commuting apparatus observables. So we drop the requirement of commuting apparatus observables. We ask whether noiseless tracking in the von Neumann Arthur-Scaly model is possible if we allow the apparatus observables tracking the conjugate system observables not to commute. We find that the possibility exists only when we generalize the initial apparatus state of Arthur-Scaly in an extremely drastic way. The measurement interaction of Arthur-Scaly is just a sum of two terms of the von Neumann form, QP1, then add PP2. So P1 is something which leads to measurement of Q, P2 is something that leads to measurement of P. K is a coupling constant. And it is assumed that the pointer coordinates in that, we still assume that this, so in this Hamiltonian, we stick with the assumption of Arthur-Scaly that x1, x2 are two commuting apparatus observables. It will turn out that they are not the observables which, they are not the tracking observables. So instead of the Arthur-Scaly initial state, we use the more general state phi q, where times the state of the apparatus, which is given by the two pointer wave functions, chi1, chi2. And they are, let us say, again Gaussians. The only generalization here that we permit ourselves is to allow B1 and B2 to be unequal, which in the work of Arthur-Scaly were said to be equal. Now, in Arthur-Scaly scheme, they obtain approximate QP measurements by postulating their correspondence with the joint probability distribution of the commuting observables x1, x2, given by the diagonal elements of the reduced density matrix. And they find that, of course, you can measure arbitrarily position by letting B going to 0, or measure arbitrarily accurately momentum by letting B going to infinity. But in between, you have an optimum choice which gives the minimum possible uncertainty product. What we find is that instead of B1 equals B2 equals B, we shall need something drastically different. We will need B1 going to 0, B2 going to infinity. This is as different as possible from the initial conditions used by Arthur-Scaly. And, well, I think I will not set out the derivation in detail, except to say that the Arthur-Scaly Hamiltonian consists of two terms, QP1 and PP2, whose commutator is non-zero, but the commutator commutes with each of the terms. And because of this, the solution can be written as a product of some translation operators. And you see the initial, if we work in the QX1P2 representation. Now, this is something which is using the theorem that exponential A times exponential B is exponential A plus B plus half commutator of AB. And that gives you this result, which is, and the exact solution is now of this form. You see that the initial wave function now, in contrast to von Neumann's case, does not remain the same. It has some translation. And chi1 and chi2 have, chi2 tilde has no change, chi1 has this change. The final wave function, after solving this Schrodinger equation exactly, is of the following form. The final wave function is of the form at time, the final time t, which is such that kt equals 1, we can obtain the final wave function in the form of an integral over this psi q x1 x2 psi. And you don't have to read all this, but basically the only message I want to give is that they are extremely simple quantities which anybody can derive. And I do the final thing. I trace the system apparatus density matrix over the system coordinate to obtain the apparatus density matrix at time capital T. So it is given in this way by doing certain integrations on the wave function and its complex conjugate. And the result, result is to be compared to the von Neumann result, which I showed in the case of a single observable. You see, integration over x2 and x2 prime gives the result, which is here some exponential with b1 here in the denominator. And it gives one of the key results because of the connection of this divided by b1 to the delta function. You see that we can again, in some limit, obtain phi q square exactly from the reduced density operator of the two particles of the apparatus, of the two-pointer system. So, more exactly, phi q equals x1 square is the limit b1 going to 0 of this integral. And this can be written in the form of trace rho operator times some operator y, which I think I will not ask you to read this complicated expression. Finally, the apparatus phi q equals x1 square is the expectation value in the apparatus state, in the state of reduced densities operator state of the operator yx1, where yx1 is a product of the position projection operator for the pointer coordinate 1 times the momentum equals 0 projection operator for the pointer 2. Now, it's beautiful, this expression. Let me say why. For some time, when we did not realize that this complicated expression corresponds to this simple expression, we didn't know exactly how this quantity would be measured. We are saying that the position probability can be measured exactly in the limit b1 going to 0 by looking at the final density operator, by measuring in the final state of the apparatus state the operator yx1. But is this operator yx1 easily measurable? This is what we did not realize before. But in fact, this final expression shows us that this operator is measurable by the procedure of measuring quadratures, which are very familiar in quantum optics. Quadrature operators correspond to linear combination of position and momentum operators. And so probability for x1 and probability for p2 equals 0 are quadrature operators. They can be measured very simply with the standard homodyne measurements of quantum optics. And therefore, I have here a method to measure the position probability of the system by looking only at the pointer, coordinates. Now, what I have done for position, I could do equally for the momentum, and that is shown by the next expression, which unfortunately is on 2 slides, so it's difficult to read. The only thing I want to point out that is of the form, the momentum probability density for the system, p equals x2, is given by the limit b2 going to infinity. So in the first slide, in the previous slide, I needed b1 going to 0. In this slide, I need b2 going to infinity. So for the simultaneous tracking of both position and momentum, I have to have b1 going to 0 and b2 going to infinity. So now compare with the Arthur-Kelly things. Arthurs and Kelly had these results, that delta x1 square is delta q square plus b square, delta x2 square is delta p square plus 1 over 4b square. And so they obeyed the Arthurs-Goodman relation of the, in fact, they derived the, before Arthurs and Goodman, the measurement uncertainty relation. And the reason we are not bound by that limit is that our commutator of the operators yx1 and zx2 explicitly evaluated is this operator, and that is not 0. So now we have found operators for the apparatus which track exactly the position and momentum of the system. And in fact, not only position and momentum, the Wigner function of the initial system can also be calculated from the final apparatus density matrix. The Wigner function has this expression, limit b1 going to 0, b2 going to infinity, b2 over 2 b1 times this integral. This was found by Abhinav, and it shows that not only the position and momentum probability densities, but also the probabilities for q cosine theta plus p sine theta for arbitrary theta would be reproduced exactly. Because the Wigner function has this property that its marginals reproduce exactly those probabilities exactly. And this I can make all this very simple by making a small restriction on the Hamiltonian that I discussed before to discuss phase space rotations very simply. If I take b2, b1 equals half, and then I let b1 going to 0, then of course I will have b2 going to infinity. But in addition, I will have the property that the initial state of the apparatus will be symmetry under rotations of x1 and x2. And then, because the Hamiltonian operator itself has certain symmetries, I will not discuss these things in great detail because they are extremely elementary. They are extremely elementary, and what comes out of these discussions of the rotations in phase space is that not only p and q probabilities, but also probabilities of q cos theta plus p sin theta equals x1 and minus q sin theta plus p cos theta equals x2 are given exactly by the apparatus density matrix by tracing with some appropriate operators yx1, zx2, which have exactly the same expressions as before with appropriate replacements of x1 by x1 cos theta plus x2 sin theta, etc. So this means that in fact, because we have been able to show that the probabilities of q cos theta plus p sin theta for arbitrary theta can be tracked exactly in the limit of b1 going to 0 and b2 going to infinity. And because it is known by the fundamental formula of quantum tomography, which calculates the Wigner function as the inverse Radon transform of these probabilities. The Wigner function is given explicitly. This is the inverse transform, inverse Radon transform. You see here that if the probability densities of q cos theta plus p sin theta equals x1 are known for arbitrary theta, then by simple integration you can recover the full Wigner function. This of course could have been perhaps guessed by the fact, by the expression which I showed you due to Abhinav, that the apparatus density operator in fact contained the full information of the system Wigner function. Yes, now this is perhaps an important point. We can show that tracking errors in the Arthur-Scaly joint measurement of QP with symmetric boundary conditions 2, B1, B2 equals 1 obeys the following relation: delta x1, delta x2 square minus delta q, delta p square. These refer to the system. These refer to the pointer coordinates. Has to be bigger than this. So this can be, even for the best situation when 2b1 square, 2b2 square are equal to 1, even for this most favorable choice, the Arthur-Scaly tracking error would be large when delta q square plus delta p square is large. In contrast, our method in the limit b1 going to 0 will have arbitrarily small errors. So that's thank you for bearing with these calculations. Now comes the reward. There are practical applications of this idea. Maybe I can just say a few words. Basically what we are doing is, we have a system which interacts with two pointer. Typically what will happen is that we will have let's say I have this system here, which will be a photon, and I have these two pointer coordinates, which will again be photons. And after the interaction, we will look only at the pointer observables, and we are able to calculate the full Wigner function of the initial system, meaning that the system wave function has somehow been transferred, or its knowledge has been transferred to these two photons, let us say. More specifically, I can use this Hamiltonian for joint QP measurements of Arthur-Scaly or for quantum tracking. And the idea for the quantum optics experiment is contained in the paper of Stenholm, who shows how by using a pump photon, signal photon, and detector photons, which are represented by their respective fields, you can realize a Hamiltonian of the Arthur-Scaly form. And the idea then would be that, let's say the signal has an interaction with these two pointer photons, and we look later on only at the output photons from the pointer photons, and we can teleport them. There could be some reasons why the system photon cannot be transmitted over long distances. And for instance, certain frequencies teleport better. So we could now teleport these photons and look at, so basically what we have done is the pair of photons of the pointer is an image of the initial state of the system fully, not just position, momentum, but of the full density matrix. Because the density matrix can be constructed. Once the Wigner function is known, the full density matrix can be constructed. And therefore we have the full density matrix of the system can be constructed by looking only at these two apparatus photons. So, and then if we wish to measure any quadrature for the system photon, we can do this sitting very far away by looking only at these, by measuring the expectation values of these apparatus, of the operators capital Y, capital Z, etc., which we constructed before. But this is basically the idea this is a kind of idea for quantum teleportation, which, let me say, is very, very different from the usual idea of teleportation. The usual idea the usual idea is something like this, that you have some system whose state you want to teleport. What you do is that you construct a pair of photons which are entangled. And then you have some measurement of typically Bell type measurements. And the result of that measurement is communicated by classical means to some far away location where this photon travels. And then after knowing the result of this measurement, there are various possible measurements that you can do here, and depending on the result of the measurement, the person here can make a unitary transformation and construct exactly the initial state. So the initial photon does not travel here. It's this photon of the entangled pair that was prepared travels. And yet it is possible to get in this photon an image of this state. And the idea here, you see, is similar, but the means are rather different. Here I don't need any Bell state measurement. First of all, it is for continuous variables, and these are usually done for discrete, but also sometimes generalizations to continuum variables are possible. This one is explicitly for continuum variables. there is no analog of the Bell state measurements. There is no analog of the Bell state of the preparation of an entangled pair. But instead, there is something else which is not trivial, of course. It is the interaction of the von Neumann-Arthur-Scaly type, which is responsible for transferring the quantum state of the system to the pair of pointer particles, which you look at ease. So I will stop here, and I thank you for